Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm Andy RC and today I'm checking out the Warlark 80mm brushed quadcopter. Now, as you can see, this is another tiny whooper style aircraft and it might just be my favorite out there at the moment. I say at the moment because there's just so many of these types of aircraft being released as they have completely exploded from the tiny whoop craze. But this one has got everything that you would want from a tiny whoop and more. So we have got a camera up the front, and I like where the camera is positioned out of the way. Some people like to have the camera on the top so they can see the ducts, and it gives sort of a nice FPV view like you're sitting on the top of it, but I quite like the camera out of the way there, and they have designed this really well. And then we have the tiny whoop propellers and ducts that we are used to, but you will notice here we have this canopy on the top there, and that comes off very easily, and you can see there that out of the box the VTX has actually come poking out of this little hole here, so not the antenna for the receiver, which we will see in a bit. But anyway, if you want to keep it in this format, then underneath there we have the battery, and it's a fairly big battery for a tiny whoop style aircraft. It is a 300 milliamp 1S using a micro Lozi, which is nice, means I can use my hobby grade charger to charge it up, and it shouldn't take too long, probably about 20 minutes, something like that. Then underneath here you can see that the camera is adjustable, so we have this plate here, and I have actually adjusted mine already. You have these two screws at the side there, you need a tiny screwdriver to undo those, and then you can change the angle of the camera. Now I have changed mine to be flat, but it comes out of the box with a little bit of a tilt on it. My preference for flying indoors is to have the camera straight, but that's just me. Anyway, let's check what you get under the hood, because that's what I'm interested in the most. So we have just got these two clips here, and then that just lifts up. Now I'm going to be keeping this off personally because this weighs 2 grams, and with this kind of setup, any gram that you can lose is going to improve your performance and flight time. So personally I will be keeping this off because it's quite a low profile. Anyway, now this is a SP Racing F3 flight control, and you can actually buy this, and what I like about it is you can see that it's such a low profile. This is the VTX on top here, and there's a couple of pins on the flight controller, and this just slots in to the flight controller. It's all part of the flight controller, which is really nice. So you can see there that we have the receiver's antenna, which I will be keeping in a vertical position. Then the motors just clip onto the flight controller using these 1.25 pitch JST connectors, which is quite nice as well. And the frame caters for the wires, so the wires clip in there. It's just really nice. You can see that the FPV camera here, which has a fairly wide angle on it, connects into the flight controller straight away there. And we have a sleeve dipole antenna on the back, which is probably the best for these tiny whoop style aircraft. They are light and they aren't going to break, and you can see there that it's attached using a tiny connector as well, so it can be replaced as well, which is really, really nice. So I have the FreeSky version here, and this is the box that it comes in, and you'll see that it is also available in DSM-X, DSM-2, FreeSky, also Futaba, which you don't see that much these days, and FlySky as well, so that's pretty nice, and the box is nice as well. The quadcopter, of course, fits in there without any modification, and you also get given some other stuff in there as well. So we have a 1-cell charger, but of course I will be using my Hobby Tiger 6-port charger. And then we have a spare set of props and some Velcro, and that's it. And actually there's no instructions here, which is interesting, but that's fine because it's minimal setup for this one. So I'm going to need to bind it to my transmitter, and this is the transmitter I'm using. It's the Taranis Plus. So this is the EU firmware of the Taranis, not the LBT, it's the one before, and you have to make sure that D8 mode is enabled in order to bind to it, and that is the case with all of these sort of FreeSky receivers. So I have created a model, and what is great about this is you don't need to ever plug this into Betaflight at all. I have created a model, and I haven't set up any switches, so I literally just went create model, then exit, and then if I go over to the menu there, I change the mode to D8 and then press bind, and that was it. So you press the bind button there, and then what you have to do is plug the battery in with this, but at the same time, and it's a pain, you need about 6 hands to do it, press this little button here, and then you'll start to get a flashing light on there, and then it will bind to the Taranis, and then you're ready to fly. You can just put the rudder in and you can go and fly around. Now it only has angle mode selected in Betaflight, but really a lot of people just using angle mode for indoors. Not really useful flying in acro mode, I have found, but you can do it and you can unlock it, and I'll show you that a little bit later, but it's ready to go at this point, which is pretty impressive. So the next thing that I'm going to show you is how to change the channels on the VTX. So yeah, you do need some FPV goggles with this, and you can use the cheap Fury Bee VR ones, but I'm using the Fat Shark Dominator HD3s with my Fat Shark diversity receiver, a Menace RC Invader patch antenna, and a Onway antenna as well. So in order to change the channels on the VTX, you actually have to have it bound to the transmitter, and that is because we're going to be using the transmitter to change the channels, which is quite interesting. So what you have to do is make sure that the throttle is in the center position, and this is a bit tricky for me because I fly mode 1 and we're going to be using the aileron and the pitch to change the VTX settings. So what I'm going to do is I'm just taking another battery here because this one isn't charged. I'm going to plug that in there. So I'm going to double press this button here, and you'll notice the LED sequence change. Now it only does this if the throttle is exactly in the middle, and this is a problem for me flying mode 1 because we're going to be using the aileron and also the pitch to change the band and frequency. The thing is though, is with mode 1 the aileron and throttle is on the same stick, and if you knock the throttle out of that center position it goes back to being bound, so I find this very tricky for mode 1, but it's fine for mode 2 because your pitch and aileron are on the same stick on this side. So if I double press that button again, so if I go and change the pitch, you'll notice the top light changes, and that is changing the different bands. And I'll stick a chart up down here because it tells you all of these sequences and what frequencies and bands they relate to. And then if I move the aileron, you should be able to see that light change as well, but I'm going to end up knocking it because the throttle is on there. And that is, there you go, I knocked it. That is how you change the channels on the VTX. Personally, I would have preferred it just to be on a button because you have to take the canopy off anyway, and I find this a little bit tricky, but there you go, that's how you change the channels on the VTX. So the next thing that I am going to do is get this thing weighed, because I think a lot of people will be interested in that, because this board is a little bit bigger than we are used to on a tiny Whoop. So let's go and check that out. Now these scales aren't the best in the world, but I'll give them a try. So first of all I'm going to try the quadcopter without the battery installed and without the canopy. So let's try that and let it settle down. So that looks like 28 grams there. So then let's try adding the canopy as light as possible. So there you go, so 2 grams for the canopy, so 30 grams, and then the battery, that is 37 grams in total. So let's try removing the canopy now, and then we have just the battery and this. So we have 35 grams, so 2 grams this guy. I would get rid of it personally. So this is the Betaflight configurator. you get it from the Chrome App Store. I've got the quadcopter plugged into the computer via a USB micro. Of course, you don't get given that in the package, but I'm sure you'll manage to find one. Now, as this has Betaflight already flashed to it, no need to flash it. So you can see it says COM12 at the top there. Let's get and connect to it. So here you can put the quadcopter on a level surface and calibrate the accelerometer. And also you might want to enable expert mode as well, so we can check out the failsafe. But let's go into the ports first of all. So it has got the UART 2 selected for the serial RX for the receiver, and then we also have the UART 1 turned on as well, obviously, and this one also has a USB VCP. So let's go into the configuration here. We have quad X set up here, no board orientation, which is correct because it's facing forward. And you can see up here the ESC motor protocol set as brushed, which is correct. If that wasn't selected, all of the motors would spin up when you plug the battery in, and we don't want that. So then we have got motor stop enabled, and that is just out of the box there. So if you want the motors to spin up when you arm it, then turn that off. A lot of the more experienced people tend to have that setting turned off, and that is just so that you can have control at 0 throttle. So you have to save and reboot anytime you make any changes to that. And there we go, it's rebooted. So let's come down here. So we have got serial-based receiver for FreeSky. Of course, that's going to differ if you get one of the other versions. S-Bus selected here for the lowest latency. So the VBAT is turned on out of the box, but you'll notice I have modified it slightly. And that is because when I was flying on the on-screen display, I was getting a low voltage warning as soon as I took off. It wasn't this in the end, it was the way the on-screen display was set up, and I'll take you through that a little bit later. But I did have to change the voltage scaling because that was slightly out, so I tested the battery against a multimeter and then against what I was seeing on the on-screen display, and it was slightly out, so I changed that from, I think 110 is standard, I changed it up to 112. So current meter is turned on there as well. However, I don't think this has a current meter. We'll have to check that out in the on-screen display. And everything else here is stock. Let's go into the failsafe, and it's set to drop out of the box, so that is good. You're going to want to test that before you fly, but from my experience it is working. So into the PID tune here, and you can see that this is moving a little bit down here, and that is because I haven't set all of the midpoints exactly correct, so I'll have to go and do that. So these look like the stock settings to me, with the D raised slightly higher, so I'm not going to touch anything there for the flight. And we have got the rate at 0.7 again, not going to touch that, but my preference is to have it at 0.8. So everything else is stock there. Let's go into the receiver. So it's set up as AETR, which I think is interesting because usually Taranis is TAER, but I guess that's the way this receiver is set up there, and I don't have any of the auxiliaries doing anything at the moment. So onto the modes tab, and you can see there that it's only set up for angle mode. So no matter if you set up a mode switch, which I actually have, then it always stays in angle mode. So if you want to unlock that, you're going to want to take the slider here, and wherever the next position stops, you're going to want to save it about there. So that's now in acro mode there. However, I tend to stick horizon mode on the second position and then acro on the third. I'm also going to set it up to arm on a switch as well, so I'm going to select that on my auxiliary too. And interestingly, if I change my switch, see it's gone off the scale there, but it will still arm. So if I just save that, you'll see that it arms there, and then we have got angle, horizon and acro there. So let's just go into the CLI and check out the version just so you can see that it's come with 3.01 and SP Racing F3 Evo. So the next thing to do is go and check out that on-screen display and see how we can change some of the settings there. So here we are looking through the FPV goggles, and the first thing you will notice is the picture's in black and white, and that is this FPV camera. In low lighting conditions it goes black and white just like the HS1177. However, it seems that from what I can tell you can't turn that off. Now this is a problem if you don't like the black and white image because a tiny whoop is going to be mostly flown indoors and there's low light indoors, so I found that it would flick between colour and black and white, but for me that wasn't too much of a problem. So this is the on-screen display. We have the battery voltage there at the bottom left, then we have the arming mode in the middle, so of course it's disarmed at the moment. Then we have a timer at the bottom right, and we have the flight controller mode at the top left. Now, to get into the menu that I was talking about earlier, you have to set your throttle to the middle, and now we have to put the rudder to the far right and the pitch fully forward, and there you go, we end up in this menu. So now I'm in that menu, I can use the pitch stick to go up to the different values, and then when I'm at that value I can use the rudder to change the value, which is pretty handy, but you have to be pretty quick because the system can overheat and lock up, I have found, but that is just while I'm describing it in this video. Then I can use the rudder to page over to the different settings here, and this is something that you need to change. The sal was set to 4 sal here, and also the main volts alarm I have set to 1 as well. Otherwise the voltage alarm goes off straight away when you take off, and you don't want that at all, so I have set it to 1 there, and then the voltage alarm won't go off. So then we can use the aileron to go over and save or exit, so that's quite nice as well. So lastly, let's go and take it for a fly and see how it performs. By the way, when I say a voltage alarm, I don't mean a buzzer. There's no buzzer connected to this flight controller. It will probably make the model too heavy. I'm talking about that warning on the on-screen display there. You can see where it says low volts. Now this is a flight I did before I went and changed the settings that I showed you previously in the on-screen display, and then I went and did another flight, and this is that flight, and you'll see when I take off I no longer get that warning. And the reason that you do get that warning is because a 1 sal battery on a 1 sal quadcopter will sag a lot more than say a 4 sal battery. So actually in this flight the quadcopter was flying all the way down to 2.9 volts, which you would think is too low and would destroy the battery. However, when you disarm, that voltage then shoots up to 3.4 volts, which is pretty acceptable, and you can rescue the battery from there. So I no longer have the warning turned on at all, and you can see the voltage readout there in the bottom left corner. It's showing sort of like 3.4, 3.5, and it's fluctuating and not setting the alarm off because I have changed the settings. Now, I think one thing that's going to interest you is this tiny Whoop RaceGate kit that I have got here, and it's from the UK, it's from UAV Graphics, and I have to say I wasn't that impressed with it. I think it cost about £30, and it comes in a format that's very similar to those for sale signs. So the material that they have used, it's like a for sale sign that you get in the UK anyways, and you have to cut them all out with a knife, and I thought for £30 I would have liked to have seen them already cut out. So I can't say I'd recommend this kit, however it is a lot of fun. Anyway, let's talk about how the quadcopter flies, because as you can see I'm going around this course pretty fast, and I was really surprised how accurate I could be with this model. And I do think to this date it is my favourite all-in-one tiny Whoop that I've flown anyway, because we have the on-screen display so I can monitor the battery. It's flying really smoothly. The field of view isn't crazy wide, but it's just enough. It's probably about 120, maybe 115, but it was perfect for navigating through this very tight course. Now, it doesn't look so tight on this DVR, but it actually was. You would struggle to walk around this and not catch your leg on something like, say, a gate or something like that. So it really was threading the needle, but it didn't feel like that when I was flying it around. So I think that this is a really good flyer, and I do think that if you unlocked acro mode, you'd be able to do acro with it. It's got a fair amount of power, so I think you'd be doing acro with it, but you need a bigger space than what I have got. You'd need to fly outside probably, or in a big indoor warehouse, something like that. Just more space than I have got here. One thing that wasn't too bad as well was the flight time. Now I'm whizzing around here, and that would usually deplete the battery quite quickly. However, I was getting a 3-minute 50 to a 4-minute flight time, and that is flying around here quite quickly. So we are coming to the end of the flight here. I have cut it a little bit short so that the video isn't too boring, because it's just me whizzing around this same course here, and I was having a lot of fun with it. So yeah, this is the tightest part here. We have the curtains behind us, the chair at the side, and I didn't hit it at any point, so that was pretty impressive. Anyway, that is my review of the Oversky Warlark 80. I think it's really good. I'll put a link in the description. So as always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.